You can see the sound panels back there. This is so hard to do. There we go. These sound panels, built myself. They suck. I put a cloud up there. I call it the bum mattress. It looks real bad. Might as well start with the KP3. It's what you came here for. Well, maybe. This and the K-Oscillator were like the first like pro gear things that I bought. This isn't really pro gear. This is kind of like fun gear. The K-Oscillator. And these are the things that I've sort of, got most of the followers on the channel from. They're fun. They're fun. So the drums, I've got a DW Concept Maple with like a 26 inch kick. I was in a rock band and blues rock band, and the Black Keys were really popular, so I was like, I'm going to get that big old kick. And it sounds awesome, but it is large. Probably way too big for this room, but that's fine. Three different snares. Got this guy, which is a Ludwig. You can see the badge. If anybody out there knows much about this drum, let me know. This snare actually was from the first kit I ever bought. There's a date stamp in here, September 8th, 1966. I guess you could call that vintage. Next, I've got this DW. It's a Concept Maple. This is their like black wax thing that they have. Freaking awesome snare. That drum is like, you just get it as a beginner drum because it's like pretty cheap and it's hard to make sound bad. If you tune it up right, it's gonna sound awesome. So this snare, this is a Mapex Black Panther. I think this is Mapex's like answer to the Black Beauty. It's got two throw-ups, which makes no sense to me. For rock drums, that thing sounds amazing. What I got on the kick, I have, you know what it is, the AKG D112. On the snare, I've got an SM57, and then I also have these Behringer C2s. They're super cheap. The pair is like $68, maybe like $60 now. And I've got that on the top snare, and I've got one on the bottom snare. And I tried them on overheads, and they're like super harsh. But for snares, they sound pretty good. I blend it with the 57 on the top snare, just because it sounds, you can get a little bit more high end off of it. I've got this guy on the rack tom, which is a Pyle PD mic 78. It's fine for a rack tom. I mean, honestly, it's basically a 57. I did a shootout with this and the 57, and honestly, I could sort of tell the difference. I've got a CAD K212 on the 4-tom. It's actually the kick drum mic for this CAD, what do you call it, multi-pack that I got, and it sounds good on the floor tom. And then my overheads, my overheads, I'm using these Shure KS 137s. Just another pencil condenser type thing, but these things are sweet. They have a really nice transient response. I was using a MXL like 168 or something like that before on overheads, and they were like super harsh, and I was not thrilled with them. And then lastly, I've got, this is the neat King Bee super large diaphragm condenser microphone, and you cannot find them anymore. I use it as a room mic, like super far across the room, and I kind of don't even really have to touch the EQ on it, and just bring it up in the mix, and it just like perfect room sound. Last thing, this blue microphone, Spark, they don't make it anymore. I use it at work. It is my Zoom meeting microphone. It's amazing. It sounds so good. Every time that I do a Zoom meeting with anybody, they say, you sound like you're on the radio. And it is literally just going into Presonus 2-channel with like no other effects on it, and it sounds just so good. So the kick drum, the snare, the 57, and the 2 overheads are going into the newest edition of the studio, which is the most expensive piece of gear that I've ever purchased for the studio, which is the Universal Audio 4710D. It's been a total game changer. I've only been playing with it the past couple days, but it is blowing my mind so far. You can go from pure solid state to pure tube, and then you can blend it on each channel. The biggest selling point to me was that it is also an ADAT, so I can run a light pipe out of the back of it into my interface, and it's also got 4 line ins that are coupled with that light pipe, so it's 8 out. ADAT. The kick, the snare, and the overheads are going in the Universal Audio. The top snare condenser and the bottom snare condenser are going into one of those Pro MPAs, and then the toms are going into the other Pro MPA. The room mic, which is the neat King Bee, and that is going into one of these Presonus units. It's the single channel tube pre, which I think honestly sounds better than the 2-channel tube pre, which I also have. The 2-channel tube pre is actually, it's one tube that's pulling, it's affecting both channels. And honestly, I just couldn't dial it in to make it sound great on anything. I tried it on overheads, I tried it on the kick and snare, and I just couldn't get a good sound out of it. But I am willing to try other things with it, and my interface is the Behringer UMC 1820. I track drums like during the day, like on my lunch break. Part of this whole deal is that this is a hobby. I do not make money from any of this stuff. Should put a disclaimer here that none of the stuff you're seeing here none of this is like paid sponsor stuff, obviously. Well, let's talk about some other instruments. This is a Squire Jaguar bass. It is super short scale. It is super easy to play, stays in tune. The short neck is really nice. It's kind of like if you started playing guitar and you wanted to pick up bass, this is a nice one to go with. I track bass through this, which is the Sans amp bass driver. This thing is basically like an amp. Everything that I do instrument wise, except for drums, I usually do at night, so everything's got to be silent. So that's what I track bass through. if I'm doing electric guitars, I'm doing them with this, which is the Fender Stratocaster Deluxe. This was like the first thing that I was like, I'm gonna get a little bit serious about like getting a nice guitar. And I'm not good at guitar. I can make up stuff. I don't know scales, I don't know shapes, I don't know any of that stuff. I'm totally self-taught. I just make up stuff on the fly. But this guitar kind of just makes everything sound really, really good. It's got this little switch right here, which when you go in this range of pickups, it actually bridges these pickups over to the neck pickup. So I like it sitting right here with this switch engaged. It sounds so nice. I use it pretty much exclusively on that setting. I got really into pedals, especially over quarantine time. I started watching the freaking Jhs show, and it was all downhill from there. I really got into the idea of tracking drums and then affecting them with guitar effect pedals instead of outboard gear. As I got this reamp box because I really wanted to I really wanted to like make sure I was doing it right. Then I was like, well, I want to pick up like a really nice like boutique compressor, but I should have thought a little bit more about that and not gotten just like an exclusive like guitar compressor. I just recently built this board. This board is ridiculous. Every time I look at it, I'm like, should I have done this? The first pedal that I bought was this, which is the Walrus Audio Deep 6 compressor version 2. I was like, I'm gonna compress kick drum with it. I'm gonna put it on my overheads. All that stuff. And then it just doesn't have the range. It doesn't have the dynamic range to really like give you a nice like thumpy kick drum. I was like sort of disappointed, but then I played guitar through it and I was like, oh yes. The Jhs Color Box, which is basically just like a really nice preamp EQ. I kind of started just screwing around with throwing this into my workflow as like an outboard processor that I like use pipeline in Studio One for. So I just throw it out, run it through this guy and use it just like as an EQ, but it just adds so much, you know, character to everything. Snakebite reverb, which is cool. It's a great reverb. If you dial it in right, it sounds awesome. I got this overdrive, the Walrus Ages. This Walrus Ages is like, it's perfect. It's a perfect studio overdrive. It's got 5 modes. It's like a Swiss Army knife overdrive. And then I went nuts. And then I went totally bonkers out of my mind. And I got this Strymon Night Sky. I wanted a reverb. I wanted a, you know, super, you can do anything with it reverb, and this was like brand new. I don't think a lot of people have it. I haven't seen this thing on a lot of boards. I don't know why, guys, because it is awesome. That bad boy, which is the DSM Humboldt Simplifier, made in Chile. This thing is freaking awesome. It has more I/O than you could ever dream of. It's got a effects send and return, stereo return. It's got headphones. It's got an auxiliary in. It's got a through. It's got balanced XLR outs, which that's what I'm using in my interface. And I guess lastly, we'll talk about the monitors. I've got these KRK Rocket 5s. One of the first pieces of gear that I bought. They're fine. I honestly don't mix on monitors much anymore. I mix primarily in headphones. I use these guys. I use these these Audio-Technica ATH M50s. I'll start with those and then I move to the KRKs just to get a different reference. And then after that, I move to these guys up here. which are these B&W. They're not powered speakers. They go into the Sprout, the PS Audio Sprout, which is like my little DAC box that I use for just listening to music. I got my record player going into it. This was fun. I'm glad that I was able to finally do this. If you got questions about any of this stuff, throw me a question in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel. Alright, later.